Hi everyone, welcome to today's edition of Scouting for Growth. Today I am meeting with Elisa Vlerich, a partner at Ninepointfive Ventures, the venture capitalist dedicated to corporate venturing. What I love when I read Elisa's profile is that Elisa loves removing syntax complexity from the proverbial crap, applying creativity and execution to everything she does. So welcome, Elisa.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you for those poetic words.
I love reading that about you on your profile on the website. And I understand that you are the most comfortable with complexity. Et le bonheur est dans l'action. So I would love to hear a little bit more about you and what drove you to become a VC.
Actually, I have a non-VC profile. Used to be an M&A lawyer, worked at a big law firm for a long time, then went on to doing an MBA to sort of broaden the scope because I couldn't imagine myself writing contracts for the rest of my life. Okay. I did that, and then I continued in the M&A space for a few big corporates and went on to joining an investment fund. And by chance, I met the team and I loved the idea of corporate venturing, which differentiates from, let's say, traditional, VC activity in the sense that you have the power or the leverage of a corporate to go faster, to scale faster, to have what we call an unfair competitive advantage in the market. And that really attracted me. And so there were a team of 3 already when I met my colleagues, the other partners, and they were desperately looking for a woman to join the team, or at least for some diversity. And they didn't have anyone with a sort of financial legal background yet in the team either. So this fitted perfectly with the other, let's say, the other profiles. One of the founders is an ex-entrepreneur, founded his own company, build it up from a 20 million business to a 200 million business together with a private equity player. Another of the partners is a venture builder who actually had the idea, that's Peter, who had the idea of founding the company based on his own frustration, helping a lot of corporates to innovate, to develop new business models, but never being able to actually build those businesses, and realize that often the projects got stuck and went nowhere. So he had the idea of building a fund which actually supports corporates to go from idea to action. And then the third one has more a typical investment profile. Used to work at PE and VC funds before. So I was, I think, a good, fourth wheel on the wagon. And that makes, I think, our team very, very interesting because we come all from different angles, and that makes our decision-making process and our investment process all the more interesting and hopefully better.
Which takes me...
That's how it happened. So a little bit of chance.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because serendipity was part of the equation here. And that takes me to what corporate venturing means. You started defining this for us, but for the people who may not know why you would do corporate venturing, can you explain to us what that means and why you are doing it?
So why are we doing it? We think it's a gap in the market in the sense that there are a lot of traditional VC funds, with or without industry focus, active all over the world or even in Europe. We have never heard of, we know a few players who are venture builders. What is a venture builder? That's an agency supporting usually big corporates, any type of company, in developing new innovative business models. So where is our industry going and how can we play in that space without having to overturn our current business? And very often there's a lot of resistance within companies to start cannibalizing on their own business, to to start new ventures, which are often very small when we're talking about a billion-dollar company. It's hard to start something new, which is not totally fitting into the existing company. So we're not talking just about launching a new product on the market. It's launching a new business model. And that's where it's difficult. One, people don't want to cannibalize on what they're doing. Two, people don't always have the skills to build a new business model. They don't have the right people to do it. And three, there's also not the appetite because it's often so small compared to the rest of the business, so it doesn't get the attention it deserves. And taking those factors into account, we figured that just being an agency and supporting them in developing the business model is not enough. They really need more support. They actually need, that's what we believe, a fund that co-invests with them, that excubates their venturing activity, and that mimics a normal startup with the unfair competitive advantage of the corporate, bringing in some resources. So you try to sort of make a best of both worlds, make a startup that's independent, that doesn't get suffocated by the corporate, that gets all the attention it deserves from its two investors, that gets people on board who are incentivized as founders and who have the skills for that specific business opportunity, with often a more techie profile than maybe you could find in the traditional corporates. Because most of the startups we build with corporates do have a tech component because it's around innovation. So usually there is an important tech component there. And that sort of combination of ingredients, finding the right entrepreneurs who are not corporate people, taking the whole business unit or the whole activity outside the corporate, but still fueling it with resources from the corporate and with our knowledge in building startups, makes a startup that is actually better placed in the market than let's say another startup without the corporate around to help to support it. That's the theory, of course.
It's a great definition, and I will stretch that a little bit. So, my definition of corporate venturing, I think, includes two pillars: the scouting for venture and really understanding where potentially the new business model may come from. So in the world I live in, we scout for ventures and try to identify new business models which may be relevant for insurance companies, but also to help them disrupt themselves. So we love talking about the McKinsey 3 horizon, efficiency, innovation, product innovation you mentioned, and game-changing innovation, which is a business model innovation. So that is the first area. And what we do with the corporate is helping them understand maybe how to partner, with those ventures and start investing in them, get their foot dirty and get started on the path of corporate venturing. Second path is absolutely yours, building a fund, working with the corporates and helping them build, scale, launch amazing new business model which are not in conflict with the core business and the HQ. But that takes a lot of time and effort. So my next question to you is, how do you convince the corporates today to actually see the light, not cannibalizing their core business, so considering corporate venturing as a way to scale, grow, and build $1 billion companies of tomorrow, and then allocate the resources, Elisa, because resources here are important too.
Yeah, thank you, Sabine. I think they are convinced of their own. If they don't innovate, someone else would do it, and they lose the competitive, play. So they're convinced. Why are they convinced to do it with us? Because often they've done things on their own. Sometimes they've succeeded. Very often they sort of run against a wall, or at least they encounter a lot of hurdles. And then when they hear how we go about it, sort of doing a venture buyout, they'll often instinctively, knowing what they've been doing before, spending a lot of money on innovation often, they feel for it. Because we also always tell them, we've got more to lose than you do. We are a small fund, 35 million capital. You are a huge corporate, $1 billion company. So you can waste a few millions and it's not going to hurt you. If we waste a few millions, the fund is no longer going to exist. So our raison d'être is to make money on our investments. So if you do it together with us, not only do you only have to put in part of the investment, but also do you know that you're actually partnering with someone who has much more to lose than you do. And I think that convinces them, together with the rest of the story that I already told you, that actually doing a venture buyout, externalizing their innovation is good for, it benefits them in the long term because it helps their innovative companies to go much faster. That together with the sort of we've got more to lose than you do, convinces them we are the right partner.
So how do you balance financial return? You said we are 25 million fund, so therefore we cannot waste resources and money with strategic returns, which is often, I think, what corporations are looking for.
Yeah, so that is the one thing we start off with. Strategic returns, that's not our business. The reason why we build a venture together with them is because it's of strategic interest. But what we want to build together with them is a successful company with financial returns. So if strategic returns are not in coherence or are not aligned with the financial objectives that we have, we're not the right partner. Then and that may be a good reason not to partner with us. And I'm not saying that strategic returns never have a good place, but usually they come to us because they've actually realized that they never had financial returns. And in the end, even for a big, big corporate, strategy and financial returns need to be aligned. It can be short term that it's strategic and we're just going to keep putting money because it's so strategic, but at some points this strategy needs to translate into return. If they come to us, it's because they've actually done too much strategy and too little return, I would even say.
Good way actually to put it, balance between financial and strategic outcomes. So when you build your venture teams, what are you looking for? How do you make sure that there is this equilibrium with the idea that is going to be launched into a new business model and the people you are bringing in to get the job done?
This is the key to our success, finding the right people to make it happen. So you can make a lot of slides, have a great plan, great financial plan, modeling, a multi-million-dollar company in a few years' time, but it needs to happen. And it can only happen if the team is there. The way we go about it is that we mimic a traditional startup. We look for an entrepreneur who's done it before, who's co-investing with us, sizable amount, so who's putting his own skin in the game. And that's the whole model we go by. We put skin in the game, but we ask them to put skin in the game. We double that up, triple that, quadruple that with options, like in a normal option scheme. And that's how we incentivize them. We actually responsibilize them. It's your company, you're putting your own money. And we incentivize them. Next to that, we're also giving you, an enormous bonus in equity. So you feel this is your company. And usually we start with one hire, sometimes two hires, depending on the type of company. And we ask them to build their team with our support. Sometimes we have a great entrepreneur for the first phase, just to get a product launch. And then we find ourselves having to look for another entrepreneur for the growth phase. It happens. It happens because they tell us they want to leave, they've done what they could, they're not the right person anymore, or it can happen that we realize this is not the right person anymore. So in that sense, we are flexible, maybe a little more flexible than a traditional startup where the founder is sometimes hard to remove whenever, even if he's no longer the right person on the right spot. So that makes us a little bit more flexible. But for the rest, we really try to mimic as much as possible a traditional startup.
So it's interesting because, when I speak with founders, I often tell them that it's good to recognize that they may not be the best person for the growth and scale stage. And actually what you are saying is recognition of that is very powerful. And you recognize that as you build those ventures and probably have the conversation day one with the founders. So what could be some tips you could actually give the founders out there? Because I think some feel that they have failed, some feel that if they are not going the whole way through with their ventures, they may have failed. But actually, I don't think so. Actually, our jobs is to enable other people to get the job done so that we may go on the beach on holiday at some point, right?
Exactly. I would say like rule number one or advice number one is surround yourself by people who are better than you and who dare go against the tide, who dare be critics. Real founders often have trouble finding people, I think, who dare, have another opinion. And that makes you so much stronger in a team when there is people who are capable and willing to question and to criticize what's happening. You're going to make better decisions.
And I think the other point which I value so much from what you said, Elisa, is stick in the game. Until you put your own money, right, and it's significant money, you actually do not feel the pain. And so you need to feel that pain to actually be involved with that project. And being able to put your own money, and like the friends and family, when we usually talk to startups is we want to see you've put your own money into your company before you can go to angel investor or even VCs. And so what you're also validating is that is key as well to create a successful company.
Absolutely. That sense of ownership because they have skin in the game. Absolutely.
So can I ask you, what are the trends? What are the trends you are looking for today? How do you make choices around so many things happening in our world? I'm sure you're not going and betting on everything. You are selecting things which are going to lead to game-changing business model. Can you share with us what those are and examples?
Yeah, so we are a little bit different from a normal VC that's usually industry focused. So they could tell you a lot about a specific industry and where they see the disruption coming from. In that sense, we are really different because we get that information from the corporate. They tell us we see this disruption and we want to be part of it. And then we engage. So, of course, we've seen disruption in many different spaces, but there's some spaces that don't really, match with our type of activities. And we're thinking of biotech. I think in the biotech sector is crazy what's happening now. It's just like the whole life sciences sector is, I think in 20 years' time, medicine will look very, very different from today. But this is not the space we're in. So focusing on our space, which is more B2B or B2C kind of tech, very generally, we see a lot of disintermediation, a lot of platform business. And we can help companies be part of that, building platforms with them to actually be much quicker, more efficient, closer to their customers than was the case before in a more traditional sort of industrial relationship where you had two, three, four intermediaries before the product got to the final customer. We see that in country tech a lot. We see that in direct-to-consumer type of businesses. We see it everywhere. So I would say, like for our investment focus, the platforms and disintermediation would be two key terms.
So there is two parts to my next question. You mentioned that you look for tech entrepreneurs, amazing people who have done it before. And the first part of my question is, how do you reconcile the tech part with the business part? Because when I work with my startups, what I realize often they are tech people. And where I can help them the most is with their B2B go-to-market strategy, their social media, designing a profile, partly when they want to fundraise. At some point, they need to be out there. And we need to work probably for a year before they actually fundraise, because then they are renowned. The second part is now a lot of VCs and corporate venture funds are working really hard on the sustainability front, which means so many different things to different people. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is key part of how they make decisions, because having women on the board and having women in the team is key to fulfill the need of the customer of the future. How do you reconcile the two, Elise?
So need for tech profiles and need for diversity. So good question. Well, I suppose the assumption is that techie people are not female.
It's funny because in the UK we have a massive problem. We are not enough ladies doing STEM courses, and so even when you balance tech and insurance, in my case, 25% of founders may be female founders, at least in insurtech. So it's very small, as you can see.
It's so small. I think it's like the doctors. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, like 90% of doctors were male and 90% of les infirmières, of nurses. Nurses were female. And now it's 50-50 in terms of doctors. I think there's even more female doctors today than male, because usually girls are a little bit more serious when they study. And so this is a tough, course to become a doctor, and a lot of girls graduate. I think it's a matter of time. So give it, another 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and this will equal out. There's some, legends, or maybe there's some truth in them that women are more risk averse, are maybe less daring. And there's something to that. And I think it's more of a cultural problem than maybe an intrinsic problem that women have. And I think once that this sort of idea that they are less able to build from scratch, because in the end, it's building something new. It's really daring in a sense, to found a startup. And once that idea is gone, and if we just give it some more time, I don't see a reason why this wouldn't go up to sort of a 50-50. Yeah. Might be wrong, but
that would be great. Intuition. That would be wonderful if we see 50-50. And, as you said, it might be just about time, right? Time and a generation often we talk about for things to realign. And when you look at your teams, how do you make sure that there is the right balance around, serving the customer? You mentioned some of the business model you are looking at are B2C. So therefore the C being Gen Zs or millennials or LGBTQ or, women health. So, you need the people in the team to understand and empathize with that customer. How do you make sure that your teams do that as well?
We build incredibly diverse teams, I would say. We have one beauty company, it's a D2C beauty company. And that team is actually 70% female, I would say, because beauty is often considered more female. But actually, with that product, we're trying to launch more an androgynous sort of product, also targeted at men. But more generally, we really sort of make sure to build diverse teams. And then we're going beyond male-female ratios. We're also looking at geographies, especially when we want to launch in different geographies. We're also looking at age, seniority. We're also looking, obviously, at backgrounds, skills. So it's like a full picture. But you will not see any of our ventures where there's no balance There will always be, both men and women represented. I'm not saying in equal amounts always, but most of the time, very much so. Because as you say, half of the audience, not always, but in general, half of the audience, especially in the B2C context, is female.
Yeah. What I find with the beauty with corporate venturing, so working with corporates, is I think sometimes that balance is required because they recognize it in their own environments. When you look at the venture capitalist world, and I assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, that sometimes your ventures will reach and receive funding from VCs as well. It's not just fully funded by your corporate venture capital arm. How easy, if you have, female founders, for them to receive funding? And it's an important question because a lot of female founders out there find it really hard to get funding from VCs.
Because there's still that sort of bias against female founders. I can relate to that, and I think it's probably true. There is in Belgium, I'm not sure if this is the case in many other countries, a VC fund that specializes in funding female founders, just to sort of bridge that gap, to overcompensate the issue or to compensate for the problem. And I think that's a great initiative. Yeah. I hope that very soon, the female-male founder will be, totally unimportant, trivial, that it will not impact any decision making, and it should not. And I'm sure that we'll get there, especially once female founders also start getting great track records.
Yeah.
And it's starting to happen, I'm sure. It's starting to happen. It's just I hope it's just a matter of time. Maybe I'm naive.
It should be a matter of time. And when we look at the equation, so when I coach female founders, at the end of the day, it still remains about financial metrics and understanding the VC, I would call it the VC journey. I build VC campaigns. At the end of the day, it has to be thought through from a commercial mind. And you have to hit all the milestones, all the content, all the proposition, value proposition, business model. All these need to be thought through carefully when you're actually putting things on paper. And I know you decompose and you look at really complex business models and take that complexity out of it to take out the bullshit. So it's really making sure that whatever is on paper is true and can be broken from any angle by the VC to make sure that they're funding the right ventures as well. So I don't think it's a gender issue at the end of the day. It's making sure that the metrics and the content is right for the buyer.
Absolutely.
So I realize we are reaching toward the end of our interview. But when I look at sustainability, which is a very big and topical themes this year, with environmental, social, and governance metrics becoming key within corporate venture funds, how are you dealing with this as you build your next ventures, Elisa?
We're actually having a few portfolio companies that are actively working towards the SDG goals. We've got one venture that is making soups, powder soups from overproduced vegetables. And that actually reduces food loss in two ways. First, because there is an overproduction that when it's rotting on the fields causes CO2 emissions, which are totally, pointless because it's not even eaten. And secondly, because it's a powder soup, it has an eternal shelf life, and you can never really have to waste the powder soup. And our go-to-market strategy with that company is towards big corporates which have an important SDG agenda, and for their offices. So we do two things for them. We said, this is a great healthy soup. because the usual powder soups on the market are quite crappy. There's like maybe 5% of vegetables in there. We've got 100% veggie soup that is as healthy as fresh soup, as tasty as fresh soup, and on top of that, it actually reduces or at least helps fight climate change to some extent. So we feel not only that it's good and that it's our duty to invest our money in ESG sort of impact and impactful businesses, to use a broader term. We also think it's interesting financially. So what is great here is that we are moving towards a world where the two go together, where you don't have to make a lot of financial compromises because you want to be an impact fund. Rather, focusing on impact investing is actually going to generate better returns because the whole world is waiting for those type of initiatives, startups being there. So we are absolutely looking into it without being an impact investment fund, because we are focused on corporate venturing. That's what we do. We will never engage in anything that's negative in terms of ESG, and we will actively pursue opportunities which have a positive impact.
That's super cool. So, and I think you're highlighting language, right? When we often talk about impact investing, we think, I'm sorry to say that, but sometimes we think about charities and we don't always think about financial returns and profit. At the end of the day, the only way we can help the planet, people, is through profit. If we make profit, we can reinvest it. And it's about that responsibility for corporations to do that. And therefore funds as well to do that alongside the corporates in an effective way. So maybe the word, as you said, is responsible investing, needs to be potentially adapted to make sure that there is that P consideration as part of the choices.
People, profit, planet.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. We see it very broadly, not as charity.
That's super cool. So what would be your last word of wisdom? One side of the question I would love for you to think through is today, I would say you're a corporate venturist, corporate venture capitalist. If you were talking to Elisa 20 years before, what would you tell her?
Keep going and have fun.
Nice. Beautiful words. Today, I think we need to be able to balance the fun with the work. And when we build actually ventures, it's a lot of hard work and long nights often. I sometimes say to my startup, my brain is hurting right now. And so it's being able to accept that, but at the same time having fun. So thank you, Elisa, for being with us today and sharing with us your word of wisdom. Really grateful for your time.
Thank you, Sabine. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. If you like this podcast, subscribe now, share with your friends, and if you enjoyed it, please give it a 5-star review. Also, if you want to cover any specific subject with me, contact me on Instagram under Sabine VdL Officials or LinkedIn under Sabine VdL. Thank you.